Welcome to 10-Minute Terror. I'm your host, and tonight we're exploring the Carpenter's Watch. The year is 1807. The ship is the brigantine Mercy's Lament, 3 weeks out of Bristol, bound for Barbados with a belly full of iron goods and a crew full of sins. Captain Elias Crow was a tall, thin man who smiled like a blade. His first mate, Jonah Whittaker, was built like a barrel and twice as mean. The rest of the men, 23 souls in all, were the usual mixture of pressed landsmen, runaway debtors, and boys lying about their age, and one quiet carpenter from Whitby named Thomas Vale. Thomas Vale had done nothing wrong. That was the problem. It began with a stolen watch. The watch belonged to Captain Crow, a gold hunter with a cracked face he claimed had belonged to his dead father. One dawn it was gone from his sea chest. Crow tore the ship apart. When it was found in Thomas Vale's ditty bag, the carpenter swore on his mother's grave he'd never seen it before. No one believed him, not with Jonah Whittaker grinning behind the captain's shoulder, patting the cat-o'-nine-tails coiled at his belt like a sleeping lover. They held no trial. Crow simply read a verse from the articles, something about theft being punishable by death or marooning at the captain's pleasure, and that was that. At sunset, they put Vale over the side onto a speck in the Atlantic called Devil's Anvil, 1 acre of black volcanic rock, a single dead tree, no fresh water, no shelter. They left him 1 pistol with a single charge, 1 knife, 1 flask of brackish water, and the gold watch ticking on his wrist like a tumor. Jonah Whittaker leaned over the rail and spat. "Give the watch back when you're done with it, Carpenter." The Mercy's Lament sailed east and left Thomas Vale screaming until his voice cracked and the gulls took it for their own. 3 nights later, the wind died. The ship lay becalmed under a sky like hammered pewter. The crew grew restless, then frightened, then mad. It started with whispers. Every man heard them, but no two heard the same words. Some heard their mothers calling from childhood bedrooms long rotted. Others heard lovers they'd drowned or debts they'd fled. The boatswain heard his own tongue begging to be cut out. Then the watch appeared. Not the original. The original was still on a dead man's wrist 200 miles astern. This was a different watch, heavier, barnacled, the glass clouded with something that moved inside like smoke. It showed up on the binnacle, then on the capstan, then ticking on a different man's hammock every night. When you opened it, the face held no numbers, only a miniature oil painting of yourself, eyes scratched out, mouth open in a scream too wide for any human throat. Captain Crow tried to throw it overboard. The watch was back in his pocket before the splash died. On the 7th night of the calm, Jonah Whittaker woke to find Thomas Vale sitting on the edge of his bunk. Vale was naked, skin sun-blackened, and split like overripe fruit. Seaweed hung from his ribs in wet ropes. His eyes were gone, just raw red sockets leaking brine and tiny translucent crabs. The gold watch hung from a chain of his own dried intestine looped around his neck. He leaned close enough that Whittaker felt the corpse's breath, cold as the deep Atlantic, on his face. "You kept the best part of me," Vale whispered, voice like barnacles scraping hull planks. "Now, I'll keep the best part of you." Whittaker screamed. The scream never left his throat. Something thick and fibrous grew across his open mouth overnight. Palm fiber, coir, the same rope they'd used to lower Vale's sea chest the day he was accused. By morning, the first mate's lips were sewn shut with it. When they tried to cut him free, the blade snapped. The fibers bled. The crew begged Crow to turn back, to find the rock again, to give the thing whatever it wanted. Crow laughed, called them women and children, and ordered the rum locked up, so they killed him. They did it quietly, with belaying pins and marlin spikes in the dark. When it was done, they dropped his body over the side without ceremony. The sea refused it. The corpse floated beside the hull all night, arms outstretched, knocking gently against the planking like a patient visitor. At dawn, the wind returned, but it blew from the west now, from the direction of Devil's Anvil. The Mercy's Lament began to sail in reverse, sails backed, rudder lashed. She ran stern first at 10 knots, while the compass spun like a child's top. Men leapt overboard rather than stay aboard. The sea gave them back, bloated, eyes pickled white, climbing the chains with fingers snapped backward. One by one the crew began to confess, not to priests, there were none, but to the empty air, to the ticking watch that now sat permanently on the quarterdeck, lid open, showing every man his own ruined portrait. They confessed to murders, to the rape of island girls, to selling their own children, to the framing of Thomas Vale, because every man aboard knew now. Whitaker had stolen the watch and planted it. He'd hated the quiet carpenter for refusing to laugh at his jokes, for looking at him without fear. So he'd destroyed him the way cruel men destroy anything gentle. And Thomas Vale had come back for payment in the only currency that still mattered: truth. The last survivor was the cabin boy, Daniel Wren, 14 years old, pressed in Liverpool, small enough to hide in the paint locker for 4 days. When rescue finally came, a Spanish privateer drawn by the unearthly cries carried 100 miles on the wind. They found the Mercy's Lament crewless, spotless, sails set perfectly for a westerly course she could never have made on her own. Every plank had been scrubbed bone white, every rope coiled with loving precision, and in the captain's cabin, 23 gold pocket watches hung from the beams on chains of human hair, all ticking in perfect unison, all showing the same time, the exact minute Thomas Vale had been set ashore. The Spanish burned the ship to the waterline, but sailors still refused to sail within 50 leagues of Devil's Anvil, even though charts now show it sunk after the '39 hurricane. They say on certain nights without moon, when the sea is glass and the stars hang too low, you can see a single light moving across the water there, slow, patient, coming closer. And if you hear ticking in your dreams, gentle, almost kind, don't look at your wrist, because Thomas Vale kept his promise. He always gives the watch back when he's done with it.